Hello again, and welcome. This is David Black, and today we're going to be learning how to use Tinkercad, a popular online 3D modeling program. As the name implies, Tinkercad is a CAD program, which stands for Computer-Aided Design. Whereas SculptGL is a great program for doing organic models, Tinkercad is great for making complex models using primitive shapes that can be aligned and then cut into each other using Boolean commands. This is a very useful program, and it has some amazing classroom management features designed specifically for teachers. Let's get started.
So here is the login screen for Tinkercad. I've already got an account, so I'll choose Login. Now there's different options here. I'm an educator, so I'll choose the top one, but if you're a student in a class, then your teacher will give you a class code and also sign you up with what's called a nickname, which is your passcode. You can also set up on your own a personal account, but I'll go ahead and get into my educator account here and just sign in with Google. As a teacher, I have set up a number of different classes and I have students in them, but I'll go ahead, rather than choosing classes, I will choose designs. When you load your account in, you'll see all the designs you've done before, so you can go back to them. These designs are saved automatically. However, I want to create a new design, so I'll choose New in the upper right-hand corner, and then choose 3D Design. Okay, so here is the Tinkercad interface. As you can see, there are a number of different controls, but considering that this is a 3D modeling program, it's actually quite simple. The controls over here on the left of the screen are for navigating and rotating around the viewpoint and then changing the angle of the scene. Up here there are some controls for flipping and grouping objects. Here you can import and export objects in the upper right. But here you have a number of different categories of different types of shapes. And there's many categories. So you can see there's hardware, structures, scenery, vehicles, creatures. I'm just going to choose basic shapes to begin with. And what we're going to be making here is a keychain fob. And I think I'll start out with a basic shape. I'm going to drag this hemisphere onto the scene. So all I have to do is hold down my mouse and drag. And it will automatically drop it down onto the work plane, which is this three-dimensional blue grid. If I want to center it, I'll have to move it around to the center, which is approximately here. And moving is really simple because I can move it into the X direction, which is left and right, or in the Z direction, which is in and out. To move it in the Y direction, I have to pull on this little cone, this black cone that shows up here, and then I can lift the object up, in which case it casts a shadow and shows me the distance in terms of the grid units that it's lifted up. If I want to put it back down again, I can see the distance shrinking down to 0, and it kind of snaps onto the work plane again. The next thing to be able to do is to drag out the corners to make the object larger or smaller. If I just point to one of these dimensional corners, hold down my mouse and drag, I can drag it out in that direction or another direction and make it as big as I want to. Let's say I'd like it to be an ellipsoid about like that. Let's move it more towards the center again. If I want to make it larger or smaller on the y-axis, I'll point to this one kind of on the top. Then I can make it higher or shorter, even negative if I wanted to do that. I'm going to set it here at about 10. If I want to make the entire object larger or smaller, I point to one of the corners and then hold down Shift on my keyboard. And then all of the dimensions will resize at once. If I want to rotate the object, you can see there are these double-headed arrows, these little arcs that show up on the different axes. And if I wanted to, I could then take this and send it by hand or just click on it and then type here in this little box how many degrees I want to rotate it. Let's say 45 degrees. All right, now notice by typing in a positive 45 that it rotated it clockwise if I'm looking at it from the top. If I type in a negative number, it will rotate it counterclockwise, like this. So negative 45, and it sends it back to where it began. All right, so that is how you go about resizing, rotating, and moving an object. There is one final thing you have to learn how to do, and that is to rotate the view. To do that, I point to this cube in the upper left-hand corner here, and then hold down my mouse, and I can drag this around to change the viewpoint. I'm literally flying the camera around the scene. If I want to look at it from one of the cardinal directions, all I have to do is click on the word, such as top, and it will look straight down on it. Or I can drag this around and say, let's look at it from the front. There is, however, one thing that you need to know here, and it took me a while to discover it, but there are times when you do not want to see this scene in a perspective view, where you see that the edges and sides of the work plane converge to a vanishing point on the horizon. That's the way of showing perspective or 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface, my computer screen. But there are times when you only want to see it in 2 dimensions. And that's if you want to align things precisely and make sure they're exactly in the right position. To do that, you choose this button here at the bottom, and it will switch from perspective or 3D view to orthographic, in which case the parallel lines do not converge. It's a little bit weird to look at here. But looking at the top, I don't see any perspective. If I go to the front, it's also perfectly flat. And so this allows for a lot better alignment. However, like any 3D modeling program, you want to be able to continuously switch the viewpoints so that you can see if things are lined up correctly, because it's hard to tell from just one perspective view.
Now that's all there is for the basics of moving around the scene, changing to orthographic views, and rotating, resizing, and moving your objects. Now, let's go ahead and start combining objects to make more complex shapes. We'll begin by drilling a hole through our keychain fob using a Boolean command.
The hole is going to be basically a circular hole cut down through it, so the shape to do that is going to be a cylinder. Let's scroll down here. Here's the cylinder object. Then let's drag the cylinder onto the scene. That's about where I want to put the hole, but this cylinder is too large. If I point to the corner here, I can hold down Shift and keep all the proportions until I get this about the size of hole that I want. And then let's look at this more from the front. This doesn't seem to be poking all the way through the object, which is what I'm going to need it to do if I'm going to drill a hole through. So pointing to the top resize button, I'll drag this up to make it taller, and then take this black cone and push it down through. Let's look at it from the front. I want to make sure that it's going all the way through the object, so when I cut the hole, it won't just be going part way through. Okay, but this is not exactly where I want it to be from the top view. Let's get this lined up a little bit better. You can always do edit undo. By the way, if you want to zoom in on the scene, just take 2 fingers on your trackpad and move them towards you, or you can use the center wheel of a 2-button mouse and zoom in. If you want to pan the scene over so you can see it better, I'm holding down Shift and Control on the keyboard, and then I can drag the scene around. So, showing you how to rotate, how to pan, and then how to zoom. This isn't where I want it, so let's put it over here. I want to make sure when I 3D print this, that this will have enough plastic around it that it won't break through, so that looks like a pretty good position. And going back to 3 dimensions, just make sure it's cutting all the way through, which it is. However, right now it's a solid object just like the half dome that I've got here. I need to turn it into a whole object. And here's how you do it. Just click on this button over here that says whole. It goes transparent, but it is not yet cutting a hole through. To do that, I have to select both my cutting shape, the cylinder, and the shape it's going to cut through, which is my half dome. I'm holding down Shift and clicking on the half dome, so now both of them are selected. Now notice this button up here, which was grayed out, is now solid. This is the grouping button. And you can also use keyboard shortcut, which is Control G. So both objects have to be selected and then grouped. Takes a moment, and there we go. We now have a hole cutting through the half dome. Now let's do one more step. I'm going to cut my name into this. There is a text tool here. So if I drag the text tool directly onto my object, say about there. So first let's turn it into the text that I want. I can choose the word text here in the window and delete out those letters and put in my name. Okay, I can change the font here. Now, there's not a lot of choices, only 4. I do like the multi-language the best. The letters are a little bit thicker, look a little bit nicer, I think. So I've chosen that. Let's make this smaller. I'm holding down Shift. It's actually going into my hemisphere here. Let's lift this up a bit. And I don't want this to be right in the center. It still is a little bit big. Now looking at this from the front, here's where I want to go into orthographic view. You can see that this is cutting down, not all the way through, but most of the way. That's probably going to be too deep. So I'm going to lift this up, say about there. I want to make sure all the letters are cutting in, but maybe only about halfway through. That should be about right. It looks like that's pretty good. Like any other object, I can turn this into a hole. And then holding down Shift, I'm going to also click on my hemisphere, which has a hole in it already, and then group it. And here's the hole. So my name is now carved into the object. A final thing here for this is that I think I want to make a little swash underneath my name. And to do that, I'm going to use this, what's called Scribble tool here. So I'm dragging this into my scene, and as soon as I let it go, it pops into this window here. And what this allows you to do is just draw a scribble shape, and it will be extruded as a three-dimensional object. Let's make a swash object. All right. Now, if I want to, I can come in here and modify this, make it thicker in spots. Let's say I like that. When it's all finished, you can see it up here, by the way, in the preview window. I choose Done. There it is. Let's go to the top view. And I want to put this where it will work. Say right here under my name. Let's shrink this down just a little bit. And I think I'm not going to keep this proportional. Let's say we do it about like that. Put it where I want it to go. Let's look at it from the front. Right now it's going all the way through the object. So going to the front view, I will lift it up so it's about at the same depth as the other object. My words. I think I like that. Okay, now let's turn it into a hole. Shift click on the developing fob here and then group it. There it is. At any point, I can choose to ungroup these objects, and it will walk back in steps in case I want to do something like, oh, I didn't quite get that how I wanted. I think it's still a whole object. I think I want to move it down like this and over a little bit. And I can even go back and ungroup my name if I want to. But having it selected, I will shift click and select the whole thing again and then regroup it. And let's see how this looks in 3 dimensions. Okay, I like that. We got a deep swash carved in this. So I've got my name, I've got a hole for the chain. So at this point, this is ready to go. All I need to do is save it, except it's already been saved. It gave it a name, Mighty Hillar. I don't think I like that name. I can change it at any time. So clicking on it, let's call this Dave Keychain Fob. Now this will save and keep inside of Tinkercad, but if I want to 3D print this, which ultimately I do, then I'll want to export this. If I choose export, I have some choices. I can do OBJ, which is probably the best one. I can do STL for direct 3D printing, or I can save this as a GLTF file, which is the WebGL format. So at this point, I'll just say I want it to be an OBJ, click on it. It exports it as a zipped file, as you can see down here in the bottom left. So before I can print it or use it in another program, I'll have to unzip it, but that's not a problem.
As you can see, this program is very easy to use and has wonderful classroom management features. There are infinite possibilities for the types of projects that students can do using Tinkercad for their media design projects. Here are a few examples.
Using Tinkercad, students can build models of various types of viruses, then print them out to create a classroom viral mini museum, complete with display cards that discuss the details of the virus and how it invades human cells. In a chemistry class, a student could use Tinkercad to build a model of a favorite molecule. My favorite molecule is this one, Tyrian purple. Here's an example of another project that I've had my students create in order to practice Tinkercad. It's a robot. Now, if I export this as an OBJ, I can take it into Mixamo and then add bones through auto rigging, and then apply animations. Here it is doing the chicken dance. Tinkercad also allows OBJ models to be imported, although their materials won't show up, including our old friend, the gray alien. If I want to create a series of frames of the alien rotating in 360 degrees, I can precisely control the rotation every 10 or 15 degrees around the y-axis and take screenshots. Then stack the shots in Adobe Photoshop or Photopea for precise alignment and then re-export them. I can then play back the still images interactively in MIT Scratch or Wik Editor. Not only can I import SculptGL objects into Tinkercad, I can import Tinkercad objects into SculptGL. By working back and forth, I can use Tinkercad for its Boolean commands and SculptGL for its organic modeling and texture painting, and then come up with any object I can imagine.
There is so much that can be done here. I'm soon going to be creating a video on 3D workflows and how to incorporate Tinkercad into all of your 3D designs. Thank you for listening and keep on learning.